What is up, YouTube? It is the Atheist Guard here. I'm going to be basically just going through the questions for atheists thing that a lot of people like to do. This one I'm getting from the carm.org website, Matt Slick's questions for atheists. Of course, that buffoon's been refuted so many times, it's ridiculous. One of my favorite debates was between him and Matt Dillahunty. You should look that up. It's on YouTube. I mean, you should be able to find it pretty quickly. Either way, let's go through this real quick here. I don't intend to spend a whole lot of time explaining this, but I just find it to be one of the more amusing things that atheists like to do, is to go through these questions and just show how utterly simple the answers can be, and how flawed the questions themselves can be sometimes. So page 1 of the survey here, it's a 2-page survey. For some reason they couldn't fit 10 questions on one page. Let's see, how would you define atheism? And of course, they give you a bunch of options to select from. There is no God or gods, not knowing if there is or is not a God, a lack of belief in God's existence, without belief in God or gods, rejection of the God concept of any kind. Actually, all of those would apply to atheists. Now, not knowing if there is a God or God, that's an agnostic, because that's about knowledge. But if you don't know if there's a God, then you probably don't believe there's one. At least you shouldn't believe things that you don't know. If you can't demonstrate it's true, why would you believe it in the first place? So a lot of agnostics are in fact atheists because they don't currently believe in a God or gods. They don't know if one even exists. So they don't have that belief. Not having that belief is an atheist. I selected without belief in God or gods, but the rejection of the God concept of any kind, that's also sufficient, because what atheism is the rejection of the claim that a God exists. Someone claims a God exists is true. I don't think they've made that case, therefore I don't accept that claim. That makes me an atheist by definition, because I don't currently have a belief that a God exists. And that's something that's tentative. All it would take is evidence. Show me some evidence, sufficient evidence to justify that belief. I'm no longer an atheist. I don't claim to know that there are no gods, although I think that's probably the case. But I don't have any burden of proof to demonstrate that, because I'm not trying to convince people there are no gods. I'm just trying to convince people that there's not sufficient reason to believe a God exists. Not that the claim no gods exist is actually true on its own. Because again, that's the null hypothesis. Why would you want to prove a negative? You can't prove a negative by definition. It's like saying, I believe there are no Bigfoots. Really? How did you determine that? Did you scour the entire planet Earth looking for Bigfoot and can confirm for a fact that there are none? No, you don't believe in a Bigfoot because there's not evidence for a Bigfoot. And it's probable that there isn't one. And you can even say, you know what, I bet there's no Bigfoot. But you don't have a burden of proof to show that. The people who claim there is something, whatever it is, they have the burden of proof to show that that thing exists. All right, let's move on to number 2 here. Do you act according to what you believe in or what you lack belief in? I act in accordance to what I believe. What I lack a belief in doesn't inform my beliefs. It's a nothing. It's like, I don't believe leprechauns exist either. Does that inform my actions at all? No, it has no impact on me whatsoever. Do I act according to what you believe in or what you lack belief in? That's a weird question. Nobody acts in accordance to what they don't believe in. Well, I guess in some sense you could say, as a rational skeptic, that action of being rationally skeptical, but that's not based on what I don't believe in, it's what I do believe in. I believe in the power of being rationally skeptical, that it gets you closer to the truth, that not accepting claims with insufficient evidence keeps you from accepting foolish claims, or false claims, or just claims that aren't backed up by any evidence. I mean, it's almost tautology at that point. So I act in accordance to what I believe. Um, let's see, number 3. Do you think it is inconsistent for someone who lacks belief in God to work against God's existence by attempting to show that God doesn't exist? Who's trying to show that God doesn't exist? That's, again, a foolish proposition. Why would you try to prove a negative? I'm not trying to convince you that no God exists. I'm just trying to convince you that there's not good enough reason to accept the claim that a God does exist. So what are the options for this weird question? It is not inconsistent to lack belief in God and also try to show God does not exist. Well, that's true. I mean, you could try to show that God doesn't exist. You could say, well, by this definition, this particular God doesn't exist. I can do that with the classical God of theism, specifically the Christian God. I can do that. I can show that these gods don't actually exist. It'll tend to get into that practice because what's the point? Why would I have to show that they don't exist if they can't even be shown to exist? I don't like taking the burden of proof on myself and making claims like that. Hold on, I gotta go address this stupid trouble alarm that goes off every night at midnight. I'll be right back. So let's see, option number 2. It is inconsistent to lack a belief in God and also try to show that God does not exist. No, it's not inconsistent, it is consistent. It is not inconsistent. It is neither consistent nor non-consistent to lack belief in God and also try, okay, whatever. I'm going to select that it's not inconsistent to lack belief in God and also try to show that God doesn't exist. And it says you can provide additional comments. Let's see, any particular God that is sufficiently defined can potentially be shown to be illogical or improbable on its own, such that a case could be made that such a God does not exist. But the burden of proof is on the positive claim that a God does exist. I'll spell it out for these idiots. See, why are you an atheist? That's number 4. See, I'm an atheist because there's no evidence for God. That's the one they have pre-checked. I always find it weird when there's a survey and they have pre-checked answers. It's like they're not actually looking for truth. They're not actually looking for anything. They want to try to condition you, bias you to a particular answer by showing a check mark where they think you probably want to select. Actually, I kind of agree with this one. I am an atheist because there's no evidence for God. See, what's the other ones? I am an atheist because the God concept makes no sense. That's true too. I am an atheist because nothing in my life convinces me of God's existence. That's true too. I'm an atheist because I don't need God in my life. Yeah, I don't really have a need for God in my life. I don't even know what that would mean. Like, what would a God do in your life that you would need because I don't happen to believe one exists? I'm going to put in the additional comments that the first 3 answers are all good reasons. Let's see here. How sure are you that atheism is proper position to hold? So they didn't even get the sentence correct. Is a proper position to hold is how they should have worded it, but they put is proper position to hold. Okay, so their grammar sucks, whatever. How sure are you that atheism is a proper position to hold? Absolutely sure. I'm going to put that in here. And they even had additional comments saying it's the default position. No. You know what? I'm not going to put absolutely sure because I don't think absolute certainty applies to hardly anything except esoteric labels and logical absolutes being reliable, that kind of stuff. I'm very sure. So to the highest degree of certainty logically possible, I am certain that atheism represents the most honest position regarding the claim that a God exists. Because it's the claim I'm talking about. I'm not saying atheism as there is no God. I'm saying atheism as I don't believe your claim. That's the most honest position to hold because there's not enough evidence. If you had enough evidence, it would be dishonest to hold that position. But I'm very sure that the proper position to hold is atheism given the lack of evidence. 6, let's see here. On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 is weak, 5 is strong. How sure are you that God does not exist? Okay. How sure am I? Well, that kind of sounds like number 5. I'm very sure. One of the options is I am pretty sure God does not exist. I know that God does not exist. Those are the top 2. One of the options is I don't know if a God exists or not. Well, that's true. I don't have that knowledge. Another option is I suspect God does not exist. Yeah, I have that suspicion. It's an overwhelming suspicion based on the lack of evidence and the length of time we've been discussing these matters and the lack of logical support for the concept. I mean, where evidence is to be expected, the absence of evidence is actually evidence against it. I lack assurance either way. Well, that doesn't make any sense. I am pretty sure that God does not exist. I know that God does not exist. Well, it depends on the definition. I know some gods don't exist with certainty, almost absolute certainty. If they defy certain absolutes like the logical absolutes, then I know absolutely that they don't exist. But I can't say that for all gods. I'm going to put I don't know if God exists or not. Because they're talking about surety. How sure are you that God does not exist? I don't know if a God exists or not. I'll leave it at that. But I don't currently have a belief that one does, which makes me an atheist. Makes me an agnostic atheist. Why do you believe your atheism is a justifiable position to hold? That's pretty much like the previous question. How would you define atheism? Or how sure are you that atheism is proper position to hold? That poorly phrased question. It's the same stupid question. Why do you believe your atheism is a justifiable position to hold? Because there is no evidence that God exists. The other options are, it's a feeling I have. No, see, that's what theists do. They base their belief on feelings. Because atheism is more logical, well, it's more consistent with logic. Because you can't prove God exists. Nobody has so far. I don't know that you can't, that someone can't. I certainly can't. So if they're saying you as meaning me, no, I can't prove God exists. If I could, I wouldn't be an atheist. Because there is no evidence that God exists. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So I'm going to select that answer. Number 8. Do you affirm or deny that atheism is a worldview? A worldview is a set of unproven beliefs and or assumptions that a person uses when interpreting the world around them. Well, as atheism isn't a set of beliefs, obviously it's not a worldview. Atheism is not a set of beliefs. It is a position on one proposition, the rejection that the claim a God exists is demonstrably true. That's all it is. You're just rejecting that claim. Someone says God exists is true. You're saying, I don't believe that. That's all it is. There's no other beliefs, so it's not a set, so it's not a worldview. My worldview is informed by things like humanism, Buddhism, things like that, but it has nothing to do with atheism. Atheism is just this label that they put on things on this one specific proposition for not having a belief in gods, which doesn't inform my worldview, doesn't inform my actions, like the other question that asked. It has nothing to do with how I view the world, because it's just as irrelevant to me as my lack of belief in leprechauns. It just doesn't have anything to do with how I assess the world around me or my worldview, my morality, none of that. It's tied to my absence of belief. Number 9, what is your opinion of the Bible? The Bible is primarily fiction with occasional truths woven into it. Okay. The Bible was written by ignorant desert nomads. True. The Bible has been corrupted and cannot be trusted. True. The Bible is full of contradictions. True. The New Testament was written hundreds of years after Jesus. True. All of the above. It is a myth book. Well, a book of a particular mythology woven together from previous mythologies. That's my additional comment on that. What is your opinion of Jesus? I don't know if Jesus existed or not. That's one answer. Jesus was a great teacher like Buddha and Confucius. I don't know that. Actually, I don't find much of what Jesus said to actually be that profound or relevant or even correct in some cases. Jesus existed but has been fictionalized into a deity, and Jesus never existed. Well, I think Jesus existed, but I think he has been fictionalized into a deity. I opt for the point of view that Jesus is legendary with fictional attributes and actions added on top of what may have been a historical figure. I'm going to add human, historical human figure. Let's see. See, I'm not a mythicist. I don't think Jesus is completely false or didn't exist at all. I don't know. I just think that there's good enough reason to think that Jesus did exist, but I don't think there's any reason to think Jesus turned water into wine, rose from the dead, did all that stuff. You know, just like that, there may have been someone upon whom Robin Hood was based, or King Arthur, or things like that. These are figures of legend that may have been based on an actual real person, but upon which additional fictions have been compiled. You know, they've been modified, elaborated. Let's see here. What is your opinion of the concept of the God of the Bible? So the concept, okay. The God of the Bible is a moral monster. Well, it's an immoral monster. It's not a moral monster. The God of the Bible is loving. No. The God of the Bible is fiction. It does not exist. Well, yeah, obviously. The God of the Bible is omnipresent. Why would that even be an option for an atheist to select from? The God of the Bible is a construct of other God concepts. That's actually pretty good. And they had in the additional comments, if the God of the Bible exists, he isn't worthy of worship. I'm not even going to leave that in. I'm going to delete that comment because it's irrelevant. I'm not going to entertain a hypothetical if situation for something that isn't indicated. You know, while it's true that if this God existed, he isn't worthy of worship, there's no reason to even make that statement. That's just like saying, if Xenu existed, he isn't worthy of worship. Well, why would I even make that statement? There's no reason to even think Xenu could exist. Whatever. Number 12. What is your opinion of the Christian concept of hell? Well, hell does not exist, is my opinion. But of the concept, they have other options here. It says hell is separation from God. Hell is what we experience here on earth. Hell is just an idea meant to scare people. Hell is an idea invented to control people. Well, the first two options are identical. You scare people, you control people. It's the same freaking answer. I don't believe it's separation, though. I mean, if you read the Bible, it clearly describes hell as a place of eternal torment. It's in there. It's scriptural. The hell is separation from God thing people invented to make hell seem a little less, scary, or that God was not that big of a monster that he'd actually torture people for eternity. But there's no basis for that at all. Yeah, you're separated from God, but it's also in a place of eternal torment. It says that in the Bible. So this hell separation from God thing is just inconsistent with the concept of hell as described by the Bible. But I don't believe hell exists in the first place, so it doesn't bother me. Hell is just an idea meant to scare people. That's pretty strong. I actually kind of like that one. Because it is the carrot and the stick thing. That's the way these base primitive religions work, is they scare you. And they say, well, you can either get this or have this done to you. You can live in reward and pleasant, sublime bliss, or you can be tortured for eternity. Now, which one do you want to pick? Oh, you want the bliss? Okay, then you have to do this, and pay us tithe. Give us money. So it's controlling people. But unfortunately, I can't select more than one answer on this question. I'm going to put that hell is just an idea meant to scare people, because that also includes in it that hell does not exist to me, because it's just an idea. Ideas do not necessarily map to anything that actually exists. What is your opinion of evolution? How is that relevant? Why do they think this is relevant to belief in gods or the lack of belief in gods? This always comes up. What is your opinion of evolution? Okay, this lets me select multiples, it looks like. We evolved from lower life forms to our present state. No, because it's not really a ladder, it's not lower. Evolution is a fact beyond dispute. I'm going to select that one for sure. Because it is. All the evidence is concordant with evolution. The predictions made by evolution by natural selection have been found. It's been genetically confirmed from the top down as well as from the bottom up by comparing the physical characteristics of animals. I mean, it's a fact. It happens. We've observed it. We know it happens because we've seen it. We've seen speciation. Both, we've seen macro, micro, this distinction they like to make. It's not a distinction, it's just time. We've seen it happen. We know it happens. We know genetic drift happens. We know that, you can inherit positive traits, that all mutations are not detrimental, that there are mostly neutral, mutations, and that every now and then you get a beneficial one. And if the beneficial one gives you a higher survival advantage and can be spread throughout a population that gets isolated, then you can actually have a split. Genetically isolated groups tend to diverge more over time. I mean, this is all stuff we've seen, observed, know actually happens. So yeah, it's a fact. But again, it's like irrelevant. What does this have to do with a God? You can believe in evolution and believe in God. A lot of people do. They believe that's just the way he did it. Whatever that means. I have studied evolution in depth and know it's true. Check. I have not studied evolution in depth, but believe it's true. No, that's not true. I definitely studied it in depth. I know what I'm talking about. I don't know if we evolved or not as an option. See, that would be a good answer too, because even if we didn't have the theory of evolution to explain the diversity of life on this planet, even if that was just a big question mark, we had no explanation for how we got here, why there's such a diverse amount of animals on this planet, plants, everything. even if we had no reason that we could think of why things would progress and get more complex over time or less complex, why things would evolve, even if we lacked a theory for the diversity of life, that doesn't have anything to do with the God question. There's still no evidence for the God. And it doesn't prove that there is no God because evolution exists. It proves that humans can exist, and all the life forms on this planet can exist without there being a God tinkering with it. That there's a sufficient mechanism in place to account for the diversity of life, but it doesn't say a God doesn't exist, so it's completely irrelevant. See, if we were seeded by aliens and then evolved to our present state, okay, that's possible. If other, please specify. I'm going to select if other, please specify, but this question is irrelevant to whether or not a God exists, as both believers and non-believers accept evolution based on the overwhelming evidence of its validity and utility. And as far as evolution, see here, based on the overwhelming evidence, much of which is based on direct observation, and put that in parentheses, of its validity and utility. How would you define what truth is? Truth is that which is in accordance with what is true. Truth is it's a tautology to even define it. Let's see here. Truth is relative to the individual's belief system. No. Truth is independent of our existence. Oh, yeah. What is true doesn't depend on whether I'm here or not, or whether humans are here to recognize it or not. One asteroid plus one asteroid equals two asteroids, whether or not humans ever evolved in this universe. That is a true statement. The logical absolutes are true independent of us being able to assess them. Our assessing them is why we have a label to call them the logical absolutes, but the fact that A is A and not A is a truth statement for reality, not for humans. We tend to put it to work by basing mathematics and things of that sort on those logical absolutes, but the fact, the truth of the matter, is still independently true of our conceiving it. A galaxy is still a galaxy and not a galaxy, whether or not there's any life in that galaxy or not. So truth is independent of our existence. Truth is what we agree is true. No, agreement doesn't make it true. It's nice to have agreement. It's nice to have objective standards where it's not just one person stating something's true that makes it true. That's subjective. But a consensus gets you closer to objectivity, but it's not what we agree is true. It's independent of our existence. Truth is a statement or concept that corresponds to reality. Yeah, if it corresponds to reality, then yeah, it's evidently true. Which is why God exists is not evidently true, because it doesn't correspond to reality. Because we have nothing in reality to show that God actually exists, or any God actually exists. So that's why I don't accept that claim as true. It is not truth to make that statement. It's not truthful to make that statement. Truth is the unveiling of actuality. Okay, that's fancy. The unveiling of actuality. Actually, that kind of makes sense. What is actual? What is reality? What is the real state of things, the actuality? All right, so my camera decided to cut off in the middle of the conversation here, so I'm not sure how far back we went. I'm on 15 here. Do you affirm that the physical universe is all that there is, and that all things can be explained in terms of motion, matter, chemical reaction, etc.? No, I don't affirm that. I don't know that. Nobody knows that. Matter motion, chemical reaction, none of that applies to what happened before the Big Bang, if asking before the Big Bang even makes any sense. Whatever the singularity was had neither motion, matter, or chemical reactions. Motion can't be defined without space-time, and if space-time's crumpled into a singularity, you don't have motion. So, no. We don't know the cause of the Big Bang event, which necessarily cannot be explained in terms of motion, matter, or chemical reactions. But we have no reason to suspect any magical or supernatural cause is even possible. For much of the same reason. Let's see here. If you were at one time a believer in the Christian God, what caused you to deny his existence? I don't deny his existence. I don't believe he exists. I'm not denying anything. The wording that I read the Bible is one reason. God's moral character, not a reason I don't believe he doesn't exist. That's a reason I think I can make a case why that particular God doesn't exist, but that God could have been immoral and still existed. That Christian God could have been an existent entity and still been the immoral monster as described in the Bible. So his moral character is irrelevant to whether or not I accept the existence claim. Secular college and or university helped me leave Christianity? No. It just doesn't make sense. I grew up. Well, that's one reason. Science disproves God? No. If other, please specify. I realized there was no evidence that any God, they had God actually exists as the predefined answer, and God with a capital G, by the way. No. I realized that there was no evidence that any God actually exists. And I'm not going to put no in there. I realized there was insufficient evidence to justify the belief in any God. Yep. And the Christian God was just particularly unconvincing. As described. The Christian God as described is particularly unconvincing. 17. Do you believe the world would be better without religion? Yes, the world would be better off without some religions. Yes, the world would be better off without all religions. I'm going to check that one. No, the world would not be better off without some religions, all religions. Okay. Some religions are helpful, some are not. Irrational beliefs inform irrational actions. That's my additional comment on that. I don't buy this thing that some people need religion. Don't buy it at all. You can get freed from it. You can figure out how to live life without those ideas in your head corrupting your every thought, making you vote a certain way, do certain actions that oppress people. Now, even if your religion doesn't have those negative net consequences, you're still having an irrational belief, and therefore you are more likely to have irrational actions based upon your beliefs, because your beliefs inform your actions. Beliefs inform your actions. Let's see here. Do you believe the world would be better off without Christianity? Yes. How many people have to die before people realize that's the case? How many wars have been done in the name of Christianity over some other religion? Or the torture? I mean, Dark Ages, pretty much when Christianity was the top religion on the planet and was endorsed by governments, was one of the darkest periods of humanity, thus called the Dark Ages. We're talking about ignorance. We're talking about, people just being massacred for the lack of belief. I mean, the witch hunts. I mean, it's like, yeah, the world would be better off without Christianity. If you oppose Christianity, which of the following options best fits your reason? I oppose Christianity because it is morally wrong. True. I oppose Christianity because it is dangerous. True. I oppose Christianity because Christianity is oppressive. True. See, in the additional comment, I oppose any belief that is not supported by evidence. I'm going to leave that in there. That's actually pretty much true. The first three of these options are all concurrent and consistent with my position regarding this particular religion. Do you believe faith in a god or gods is a mental disorder? Only because it's been defined to not be. If you look at the DSM for what a delusion is, they specifically make a category for religious beliefs such that it doesn't have to fall into the definition of a delusion. It's like a delusion is this, unless it's a religion, unless it's a religious belief. That's how the DSM actually defines it. Now, that to me tells me a theist probably came up with that definition. Not that it's an honest, way to define what a mental disorder is or what a delusion is. Because there's no reason to make that exception. It's a special pleading thing. It's like, well, we would apply this to all other types of, erroneous beliefs without any evidence that are maintained against evidence to the contrary in some cases. But because it's religion, we're not going to call it a delusion. That's how the DSM actually defines it. So, in a sense, I think it is a mental disorder, but right now it's not defined as a mental disorder. So no, belief in God or gods is not a mental disorder at the moment, because some theists probably came up with the definition that makes it necessarily the case that it's not defined as one. My personal opinion on the matter is irrelevant again. So, I don't know if belief in God is a... You know what? I don't know if it is or not. Part of me is leaning to the concept that it is in fact a delusion, but that it's just been excluded by fiat for some erroneous reason from the definition of delusion. But I don't know if it is in fact a mental disorder, if the pathology is there to back it up, that there's something wrong with you if you have this belief. I don't know. I like that answer. I don't know. It's comfortable. It's honest. I don't have to make statements that go beyond what I can demonstrate to be a fact. See, number 21, must we be able to demonstrate God's existence through scientific method? Basically, the scientific method is a means of gaining understanding about the physical universe via observation, hypothesis, experimentation, prediction, and theorizing. Well, they actually got the definition pretty close to accurate on that one. Must we be able to demonstrate God's existence through the scientific method? No. Currently, it's the only method we have. You'd have to show some other method and demonstrate its reliability. But right now, all we have is the scientific method for determining what is best thought to be true about reality. Let's see here. Options. The scientific method is the wrong method for determining God's existence. Not necessarily. Yes, God ought to be proven to exist through the scientific method. That would be nice. That would really be nice if they could just do that. Like, I can demonstrate my pen exists objectively to anyone who wants to hold it, look at it. I've recorded it on video here. If there was some scientific way to prove God's existence, that would be awesome. He wouldn't be hiding anymore. A method of determining God's existence must reflect his nature and attributes and not be restricted to the scientific method. That's the one they have pre-selected. I don't like that. not be restricted to the scientific method. You still have to verify it using observation, hypothesis, experimentation, prediction, theorizing. It's still going to be the scientific method, no matter how you boil it down, because that's the only way we can internalize information and assess it. If there was another method, it would have to be verified using this scientific method. Let's see, yes, because an immaterial God can exercise influence on the physical world, which would be detectable. That's the way I've always looked at it. If it manifests in reality, it's detectable. If your God can do something in reality, we should be able to detect it. It shouldn't be a difficult thing at all. If people are praying and the Templeton Foundation, which is on the theist's side, they're actually looking for evidence of a God because that's what they believe in. If they've determined that prayer is just as good as chance, indistinguishable from random luck, that's an example of where evidence would be expected if prayer was actually effective. If this God manifested in reality, we would expect to find evidence there, and no evidence was there. So that's evidence of absence. God ought not to be proven through the scientific method. I'm not going to put any additional comments on this. If they manifest in reality, it's detectable. And a God that doesn't manifest in reality is indistinguishable from a God that doesn't exist. Makes it irrelevant, an irrelevant God. That's not even worth believing in, because again, there's no evidence. There can be no evidence for that type of deist type God. 22. Is it a category mistake to require material evidence via the scientific method for an immaterial God? A category mistake is an error in the logic in which one category of something thing is presented as belonging to another category, such as saying the rock is alive, life cannot be a property attributed to a rock, since a rock is not within the category of living things. Actually, that's a bad example of the category error. But I love the fact that there's another nice blatant grammar problem or added word here. Logic in which one category of something thing is presented as belonging to another category. It is neither a category mistake or not a category mistake to require material evidence via scientific method for an immaterial God. No, it is not a category mistake to require material evidence via scientific method for an immaterial God. Yes, it is a category mistake to require material evidence for the scientific method for a immaterial God. None of these answers are satisfactory. If a God manifests in reality, it should be detectable and demonstrable via the scientific method. Any God that is completely immaterial and thus does not manifest in reality is indistinguishable from a God that doesn't exist. The latter cannot be asserted to exist nor verified by any method, scientific or otherwise. Where does morality come from? That's number 23 here. Morality, really? We're going to go into this? Morality comes from personal opinion, partially. Or morality comes from society, partially. Morality comes from the family, partially. Morality is whatever we decide it is. No, I'm not a relativist, sorry. Morality comes from evolution, partially. There are no morals. No, there are definitely morals. Morality comes from the teachings of Jesus. That's an option in questions for atheists. Okay. So I'm going to select morality comes from personal opinion, because it does. It's still your opinion. Hopefully your opinion is based on objective evidence or a good standard, but it's still an opinion. It's my opinion that murdering somebody is wrong. I have that opinion because murder is harmful. Harm is bad by definition. Therefore, I have an objective reason for thinking murder is wrong. Thus, my opinion is backed up by an objective standard that harm is by definition bad. We don't want to be harmed. We don't want to harm others. Murdering is bad. Sorry. I mean, it's pretty simple stuff there, but it is still based on my opinion, ultimately, what I'm going to do. It's just my opinion happens to be based on a foundation that is logical, consistent, and in some sense objective, because I value well-being. Morality comes from society. Yeah, your society is going to tell you certain conditions on what is allowed, what is not allowed. Now, that doesn't necessarily make it moral, but societies do tend to come up with morals because societies tend to want to be pleasant. They want to, ensure the existence of everyone in that society is as pleasant as possible, and thus they're concerned about well-being by default. And thus the laws tend to, over time, evolve into a state where well-being is more preserved. And you can see this in different societies where that's not the case, where they're based on theology or something, like an Islamic country or something like that, where it's Sharia law and whatever. The more primitive the morality, the less concerned it is with well-being, and the more authoritative it is. It's like, I said so, therefore. God said so, therefore. And that's the kind of morality they follow. But as a society gets more advanced and more advanced and more evolved, and they start thinking things through, they start figuring out things like, oh, slavery is bad because it harms people. It harms society itself. Inequality is bad because it harms people. Once you start concerning yourself with well-being, a society comes up with morals. So it's partially from that. Your family informs your morality because you're brought up with certain morals. Some of those morals you can abandon. None of it's static. My family was racist. My family holds a lot of immoral positions on things because they're religious, they're Christian, of course. So I've rejected a lot of the morality, kept a lot of it too, because they're not bad people necessarily. They just happen to have some really bad ideas every now and then. They don't always act on them. They're not like going out and lynching black people or anything, even if they do say a racial slur here and there, which I find absolutely disgusting. But, I've rejected a lot of the morality based on Christianity, but accepted the morality that makes sense, that's based on well-being. Not everything they believe was bad. See, morality comes from evolution. Yeah, we have a certain sense of morality that comes from evolution. The sense of fairness is, social creatures, besides humans, all exhibit some sense of morality. Not nearly as advanced as ours or as complicated as we like to make it to be, but basically, social creatures have to have some sort of moral sense for their social group to work right. Let's see here. 24. Are there moral absolutes? A moral absolute is a moral truth that is always true and not dependent upon opinion, society, or preferences. Opinions, society, or preferences. No, there's no moral absolutes in that sense. It's all preference-based. I prefer to value well-being. So it's not absolute in that sense. Now, it's still an objectively sound standard because what is good for well-being, what promotes well-being and reduces harm and suffering, benefits me and benefits the entire society. That's why it's good. It's good by definition. It's objectively good because we can demonstrate that it's good. It's demonstrably good. So it's not really dependent upon opinions, a society, but it's still a preference to value well-being itself. You have to accept that as the foundation, and then from that you get objective standards like murder's bad because it harms somebody. The Christian might ask, well, why is harm bad? Because it's negative to well-being. Why should we care about well-being? Why don't you want to live in a society that cares about well-being? You have to accept that as the presupposition first. I admit that. That's a subjective thing to accept, that well-being is a good standard. But it seems pretty logical, and that it is going to be beneficial to accept well-being as a good standard. So that's why I accept it. And then from that, you get more objective standards based on, does it harm, does it not harm? Does it benefit, does it not benefit? You know, you weigh everything on a consequential basis without it being simple consequentialism. And it's not relativistic, because if it's wrong, it's wrong. If it's harmful, it's harmful. It doesn't matter if this society over here says so or not. So no, there are no moral absolutes. Whatever. It's not that important. They like to make it seem important, but it's not that important. 25. Is the following statement true or false? It is always wrong for everyone to torture babies to death merely for one's own personal pleasure. And they actually have pre-selected, it is neither true nor false. It is not true. It is always wrong for someone to torture babies to death merely for one's personal pleasure. It harms conscious creatures and therefore is objectively bad if one values well-being, which is itself demonstrably beneficial to societies. Valuing well-being is demonstrably beneficial to societies. Those that don't value well-being tend to suck. Objectively, not an opinion, they just do. They don't value well-being, you're less safe, you can get murdered. You know, if you're in a society that doesn't value well-being, you're screwed. You know, you're gonna have a very bad existence, a very miserable existence. Being miserable is bad by definition. So it's demonstrably beneficial to societies to value well-being, and it harms conscious creatures and therefore is objectively bad. It's easy. So it's just not true. This neither true or false thing is relativistic, and it just makes no sense. 26, should morality be based on reducing unnecessary harm? Yeah, that's a good one. Morality should be based on reducing harm. It should be one of the factors, not the only factor. It's an additional comment somebody evidently put. Yeah, that's true. Yep, reducing harm is a good one. Reducing harm is good by definition. Let's see here. What would it take for you to believe in a God? I love how the if other please specify box is the one that's actually selected here. And in that, someone wrote in evidence of his existence. Yeah, why wasn't that one of the main things you can select from? Why is that the if other option? I don't know what it would take for me to believe in a God. Actually, I don't. Evidence would be nice. But what that evidence would be, I'm not even sure what that would be. I don't know exactly what it would take for... I don't know exactly... Okay, this is stupid. The first two options. I don't know what it would take for me to believe in a God. I know exactly what it would take for me to believe in a God. No, nobody knows that. There is no God. That's an option? I would have to be stupid and drunk to believe in God. I like that. But no. If other, please specify. Evidence of his existence. His? Why is it his? Evidence of any God's existence. Sufficient evidence of any God's existence. Because there's anecdotal evidence out there, of course. There's always anecdotal evidence for damn near anything. Alien abductions, whatever you want to believe in, there's anecdotal evidence. But it's not sufficient to justify the belief. So sufficient evidence is what's important. 28. Do you think that a society that is run by Christians or atheists would be safer, and why? The one they have pre-selected is, I don't think a society run by Christians or atheists would be safer than the other. No. I think a society that is run by atheists would be safer than one run by Christians. Because it doesn't set up an inequality of believers and non-believers, an in-group and an out-group. It is a fact that regarding social ills, social welfare, societal health, that there's always a negative correlation with religiosity. That is, the more religious a society is, the poorer it performs regarding these metrics. It is a fact that societal ills and poor societal health correlate to religiosity, and that the most atheistic societies on earth have the highest performance, have the best performance regarding any measure of societal health. Yep, studies have shown that. I think that one was a Templeton Foundation study, actually. I could be wrong, though. Maybe that was Harvard. I can't remember exactly where that study came from that correlates religiosity to societal health. Been thoroughly and confirmed. That said, it's a correlation and not necessarily a causation. But it's a strong correlation. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not saying that the religiosity is the problem, but it is a fact that societal health decreases as religiosity increases. Do you believe in free will? Free will being the ability to make choices without coercion. I'm a compatibilist. I'm not going to write all that in here to explain what the hell that is, because I'm sure these idiots don't care. I don't know. Free will is an illusion, basically. You are coerced into making choices, whether you think you are or not. If you make a choice, it's because you've been convinced to make a choice. You have a reason to make a choice. You've been coerced by the evidence, by the situation at hand to make a choice. You're not just making choices blindly, randomly. You can't make a random choice. If I randomly go outside and I can't think of any case where you could make a choice without having a reason to make that choice. Even if your reason is to be spontaneous, that is still a reason to make the choice. You've been coerced by the merits of having a spontaneous decision. You've made a choice. I'm going to go on vacation tomorrow because to hell with it, spontaneous choice, I'm going on vacation. The reason you made that choice was still coercion. You were still coerced by the value of being spontaneous, that it's actually good for you to do stuff spontaneously every now and then. There's still a reason backing it up. There's still a good reason to be spontaneous. So you can't ever truly make a choice without having some sort of coercion behind it. That said, I'm a compatibilist. I think you do have responsibility for your choices. It's not like you can blame everything on something previous and justify away your responsibility if you do wrong to somebody. You still have free will in that sense, that you did something wrong to somebody, you're going to be held accountable. Whether you have reasons for it or not, whether you personally think that those reasons are justified or not. Whatever. But it is an illusion in that sense, that you can't make a choice without actually having a reason to make that choice. Your brain decides to do things before you're even aware of it. Neurological studies have shown that. What you decide to do is actually happening just before you actually do it, before you're even aware that you're making a conscious choice. It's more like you're rationalizing your action after the fact, but your brain made you have that action before you went about that rationalizing process to say, okay, this is why I did that. I'll cut off again. 32, what is the Dillahunty Dodge? Why does that even matter? Is ducking when someone throws something at you? Dillahunty Dodge is an old car. If other, please specify. This is something theists project on Dillahunty. primarily due to not understanding the burden of proof and a null hypothesis. That's what I see. When they're saying, oh, it's the Dillahunty Dodge, that's what's happening usually, is that they're like, oh, he's not committing to any position, so he can't be cross-examined. Yeah, because there's a neutral position of not knowing. You make the claim, I claim I don't know. I don't have to be cross-examined because I'm not claiming I know anything. You're the one making the claim. You present the evidence. Screw you. Sorry if that feels like a dodge, that I'm not committing to a position during a discussion because I don't have a reason to commit to a position, because I don't have evidence for a position, like no gods exist or something like that. I don't have to commit to a position. You're committing to a position. I'm saying I don't believe you. It's not a dodge, except for theists. Except, from the point of view of theists who think that they're right, 33, the final question. What is your opinion of Matt Slick, founder of Carm.org? He's a complete jerk, pompous idiot, completely arrogant, smug moron. These are all answers that it's actually given me the option to select. He's a nice guy. He's a waste of E equals MC squared. Matt does not have Asperger's. What the hell? Matt Slick has the IQ of a squid fart. All of the above, if other please specify. He debates dishonestly, as demonstrated repeatedly. Sorry, this version of tag was stupid. Okay, I think that's it. I think that's the end of these questions. Hopefully I got all that on video. My camera cut off twice. Like, it's having a problem recording longer videos. Like, why can't I record for an hour on this camera? I don't understand. It's a Sony CyberShot. It's a pretty decent little camera. Always records in pretty good quality, but every now and then it goes through this thing where it only wants to record 10 seconds or 10 minutes at a time or 15 minutes at a time. It's weird. I don't get what that is. I'm going to see if there's some setting that it's limiting itself or if it's overheating or something. Who knows? Anyways, as you can see, a lot of these questions came from the perspective of the theist. Like, what is the Dillahunty Dodge? Why would an atheist have to know that? Or why is that even important to even ask an atheist? Because Matt Slick, who wrote up these questions, decided to include that because he felt butthurt after his dismal failure debating Matt Dillahunty, where Matt Dillahunty just shredded his entire argument, which is basically a special pleading for the transcendent while denying that transcendent is a third category. Look it up. It's stupid. He's like, things are either conceptual or not conceptual. Sorry, we don't know that. There could be a third option. Neither. Which are the logical absolutes? Neither. That's a good third option. Transcendent is a third option. The thing he's trying to argue for in his argument is the third option. So things are not only conceptual or not conceptual, or physical versus conceptual. If he's believing in a God, he has a third option, and he's denying that third option exists to make his argument, which makes his argument completely backwards, flawed, and circular. Which, of course, Matt explained in a lot more eloquence than that. He went specifically to one or two of his premises and just demolished them. Said, look, you can't demonstrate this. This is an assertion. I don't have to come up with an answer to know that this assertion you made is not valid. And you'll see Matt repeatedly asking, well, what's the third option? You have to come up with a third option if you're claiming that my assertion is incorrect. No, you have to demonstrate your assertion is correct. If you make a syllogistic argument and one of your premises have it not been demonstrated to be correct, I don't have to come up with an explanation of why it's not correct. I just have to be like, look, that's not convincing. Your premise hasn't been demonstrated. Please demonstrate your premise. And for him to say, well, my premise is correct until you can come up with a third option. No, that's not how logic works. Matt Slick failed. And as smart as Matt is, I don't think he's an idiot. That means
he debated dishonestly. That's where I'm going to leave it. All right. Thanks a lot, you two.